6 months. No fridge. No electricity. Just sand, a wooden box, and a dark corner of the cellar. And before 1940, almost every family in rural America knew this trick. If you pulled carrots and beets from the garden in October, you could eat them crisp and sweet in April without spending a dime on power. But when the refrigerator arrived, a 300-year-old method vanished in a single generation. And tonight, you're going to learn exactly how it worked, because a small group of old-timers never stopped doing it, and I found one who showed me every step. This is sand packing, a preservation trick so simple. It predates electricity, yet so effective that one October harvest could feed a family all the way into May. I wanted to know how it worked, why it disappeared, and what happens when you try it today with zero experience and a $5 bag of play sand. For 3 centuries, this was not a hobby. It was the difference between eating and starving. In the 1700s, almost every farmstead from New England to the frontier had a root cellar, a dark, unheated space dug into a hillside or tucked beneath the kitchen floor. The temperature hovered between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The humidity stayed near 95%, and inside, buried in wooden crates of slightly damp sand, the carrots, beets, and turnips sat in suspended animation, still breathing but barely, their sugars intact, their skins firm. By 1729, when Lancaster County was first mapped, an entire township was named Hempfield, not for the crop we covered in the last video, but because the settlers understood one thing above all else. What you pulled from the ground in autumn had to last until the ground thawed in spring. There was no backup, no grocery store, no trucked-in produce from Florida. You grew it, you stored it, or you did without. The science is almost absurdly simple. Sand wicks away excess moisture so the vegetables don't rot, but holds just enough humidity to keep them from shriveling. A root vegetable is a storage organ. Its entire biological purpose is to sit underground for months, feeding the plant through winter. If you mimic that environment, you stop the clock. Carrots pulled in November and packed correctly in sand will be crisper in April than anything you buy bagged at a supermarket today. I know because I tested it, and that part of the story is coming. But first, you need to understand what happened when a machine made all of this knowledge obsolete. The refrigerator arrived in American kitchens in the 1930s and 40s. By 1945, mass production had made it affordable. The pitch was simple: cold air on demand, no digging required. And bit by bit, the root cellar went the same way as the wood stove and the ice house. Grandparents stopped teaching it. Parents never learned. Within 2 generations, a survival skill that had carried families through wars, depressions, and blizzards became something people vaguely remembered hearing about at a county fair. But there's a twist. In a quiet corner of Pennsylvania, I found a man who had never plugged in a refrigerator in his life. And what he showed me inside a 6-foot pit beneath his barn made me question everything I thought I knew about food. His name was Elias, mid-70s, beard halfway down his chest, hands that looked like they could pull a stump from frozen ground. He didn't ask why I'd driven 4 hours to find him. He just nodded once, turned, and led me past the draft horses, past the shelves of jarred preserves, to a ladder that descended into darkness below the barn floor. The temperature dropped 15 degrees by the time my boots hit dirt. The air smelled like wet stone and earth and something faintly sweet I couldn't place. Elias lit an oil lamp, and I saw them. 6 wooden crates, each 2 feet deep, lined up against the wall like small coffins. Inside every crate was a layer of sand, A single level of carrots arranged so they weren't touching. Then more sand. Then more sand. Then more carrots, all the way to the top. Each crate held roughly 60 pounds of vegetables. He opened the crate nearest me, brushed away the top layer, and pulled out a carrot that had been buried in October. It was now late March. That carrot snapped in his fist with a crack. You could hear across the cellar. Perfectly orange, perfectly firm, not a wrinkle, not a soft spot. I asked him what kind of sand he used. He said play sand from the hardware store. $5 a bag, washed, dried, and screened fine. Nothing special. The magic wasn't the sand. It was the system. He explained it. The way you'd explain a recipe you've made 10,000 times. After harvest, you cut the greens to within a quarter inch of the crown, but not into the crown itself. Cut too deep, and you open a wound that invites rot. Then you let the roots cure in open air for 24 hours until the skin toughens slightly. While they cure, you moisten the sand. Not wet. Wet sand breeds mold. You want it damp enough to hold a shape when you squeeze it, but not so damp that water drips out. Elias tested his sand by pressing a handful into a ball and giving it a light poke. If it crumbled slowly, he said, it was perfect. If it held together and left his palm shiny, it was too wet. You layer the damp sand 2 inches deep in a wooden box. Arrange the roots so no two are touching. Cover with another inch of sand. Add another layer of roots, and keep going until the box is full. The top gets a thick cap of sand. Then you store the boxes somewhere that stays between 32 and 40 degrees and doesn't freeze. A basement corner, a crawl space, a buried trash can lined with straw. The root cellar under his barn had been dug by his great-grandfather in 1883, and the ventilation shaft, angled toward the north wall, kept the air moving just enough to pull out the ethylene gas the vegetables naturally produced. If that gas built up, the carrots would sprout and turn bitter inside 6 weeks. Elias had learned that from his grandfather before he was old enough to lift a crate. He had never owned a refrigerator. He had never needed one. His family had eaten sand-stored carrots, beets, parsnips, and turnips from October through May for 4 generations without a single case of spoilage. He said, most people think you need cold to preserve food, but what you really need is balance, the right combination of temperature, humidity, and air circulation. Sand provides the moisture regulation. The earth provides the insulation. The vegetables do the rest. I left that barn with a 5-gallon bucket of clay, sand, and a crate of carrots from my own garden. I stored them the way Elias told me, in an unheated closet off my garage, expecting maybe 90 days of decent texture before they started going soft. I checked them at 60 days, still crisp. At 90 days, still crisp. At 120 days, I pulled one out, expecting a rubbery stick. It snapped exactly like the one in Elias's cellar. I had done nothing. No electricity, no monitors, no maintenance beyond brushing away the occasional carrot that showed a dark spot. The method had worked so perfectly, it felt like a trick. And that's when I started digging into what happens to the carrots you buy at the grocery store, because it turns out they're stored for months too, just not in sand. They're stored in refrigerated warehouses at near-freezing temperatures with very low humidity, and low humidity is the enemy. A carrot is 90% water. Over weeks, in a dry cooler, it steadily loses moisture through transpiration. The same way a cut flower loses water in a vase. The cells collapse. The sugars convert to starch. The vitamin A begins to degrade. By the time that carrot reaches your refrigerator drawer, it has already been losing nutrients for up to 6 months since harvest. And once you take it home, your fridge, which runs at a humidity level closer to a desert than a root cellar, accelerates the decline. But here is the part the food industry never talks about. A sand-stored carrot doesn't just stay crisp, it stays alive. The root is still respiring, still hydrating from the moisture in the sand, still maintaining its cell structure, which means the vitamins, the sugars, the phytonutrients, the things you actually eat a carrot for, are preserved at levels a refrigerated carrot can't match. I wanted to know exactly how much difference there was. So I sent 2 samples to a lab. One was a sand-stored carrot from my closet. The other was a bagged organic carrot from a national grocery chain. Both had been harvested roughly 5 months earlier. And what the lab report showed stopped me cold. The sand-stored carrot had 41% more beta-carotene than the grocery store carrot. Not a little more. Not margin of error more. 41%. The vitamin C content told the same story. The sand carrot retained nearly twice the ascorbic acid of the refrigerated one. Both had been harvested within a week of each other in October. Both had been stored for roughly 150 days, but one had spent that time in a living womb of moist sand at a stable 38 degrees, while the other had been trucked through multiple climate zones, warehoused in a low humidity cooler, and then left to slowly wilt in my refrigerated drawer at 40 degrees and 15% relative humidity, the same humidity as the Sahara Desert. A carrot is 90% water, and it breathes. In dry air, it exhales moisture and never gets it back. In sand, it drinks. That's the whole secret, and the food industry has known this for 80 years, because the same USDA research station that tested cold storage methods in the 1940s published a paper in 1947 concluding that root vegetables stored in damp sand retained higher sugar content, better texture, and more nutrients than any mechanical refrigeration method available at the time. That paper was quietly archived. It was never distributed to extension offices. It was never included in the post-war homemaker guides. You have to go to a physical library and request it by call number to read it today. What replaced it was a different message entirely. In 1945, as millions of GIs came home and the housing boom exploded, the refrigerator industry launched one of the most successful marketing campaigns in American history. They didn't just sell a machine, they sold a narrative. A refrigerator meant progress. A root cellar meant poverty. It was the difference between the modern housewife and the immigrant grandmother with dirt under her nails. General Electric and Frigidaire ran full-page ads showing gleaming white kitchens with the tagline, "No more dark corners." What they didn't say was that the dark corner under the barn had been keeping food fresher than their machines ever could. With zero operating cost, zero noise, and zero dependence on a power grid, within 15 years, the number of functioning root cellars in the United States dropped by over 90%. The ones that remained were mostly in Amish and Mennonite communities, families who measured wealth by what they could sustain, not what they could plug in. I drove back to see Elias 6 months after my experiment. It was early spring, and I asked him how many carrots he had left. He led me to the same crates he'd shown me the year before. All but one were empty. The last crate had maybe 15 pounds remaining. He'd fed a family of 11, his children, grandchildren, and himself, through an entire Pennsylvania winter on 60 pounds of carrots, 40 pounds of beets, and a root cellar full of potatoes and turnips packed the same way. His grocery bill for vegetables from December through March was $0. He didn't tell me that with pride. He just stated it, the way you'd state the date. It was obvious to him. The ground gives you food in October. You keep it alive until April. Why would you pay for it again in February when it's sitting in your barn? And that question, right there, is the one I couldn't shake. Because every American household used to know exactly how to do this, and now almost none of us do. The knowledge wasn't lost by accident. It was deliberately displaced by an industry that profits from your forgetting. And what Elias taught me next, the part about the layers, the spacing, the one mistake that will rot an entire crate in 48 hours, is the difference between a successful storage and a maggot-filled disaster. If you are going to try this at home, you need to know the exact sequence that's next. So here is the exact sequence Elias taught me. Step by step, because one wrong move and you lose everything. Step 1. Harvest your carrots and beets when the soil is dry. Wet roots carry fungal spores into storage. Pull them gently, twist off the greens, leaving a 1/4-inch stub, and do not wash them. Washing removes the protective soil microbiome that suppresses rot. Spread them in a single layer on a tarp in a cool, shaded spot for 24 hours. This curing period toughens the skin. If you skip curing and pack them immediately, the skins will abrade and gray mold will colonize the crate within a week. Step 2. Prepare the sand. You want play sand, not construction sand, not beach sand. Play sand is washed and kiln-dried, free of salt and pathogens. Pour it into a wheelbarrow. Mist it with a spray bottle of water, and mix with your hands until every grain is lightly coated, and the sand holds a loose shape when squeezed. The test Elias taught me is simple. Squeeze a handful into a ball in your palm. Open your hand. The ball should hold its form but crumble apart with a single tap of your finger. If water drips out, it's too wet and your carrots will rot into black slime. If it won't hold a ball at all, it's too dry and your carrots will shrivel. That precise moisture level is the difference between a crate that feeds your family for 6 months and a crate that stinks like a dead animal in 6 weeks. Step 3. The container matters more than people think. A wooden crate breathes. A plastic bin sweats. Elias used pine crates his father built in 1962. But any untreated wood box or even a cardboard box with drainage holes will work. The key is that excess moisture can escape. If you use a sealed plastic tote, condensation pools at the bottom and rots the lowest layer first. Step 4. Lay down 2 inches of damp sand on the bottom of the crate. Place your first layer of carrots, spacing them so they do not touch. If 2 carrots press against each other, the contact point stays wet. Bacteria multiply, and that single point of rot spreads fast. Cover with 1 inch of sand, then lay your next layer crosswise to the first. Alternate layers until the crate is nearly full. Top with a thick cap of at least 3 inches of sand. This top cap is your insulation and your evaporation buffer. Don't skimp on it. Step 5. The location. Elias's cellar held 38 degrees year-round because it was dug 8 feet into the ground. You can replicate this in an unheated basement corner, an attached garage that doesn't freeze, a crawl space, or even a buried cooler. The non-negotiable rule. The temperature must never drop below freezing. Frozen carrots turn to mush when they thaw. Ideal range is 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. If you don't have a spot that stays in that range, a used chest freezer with a temperature controller set to 38 degrees works perfectly and uses almost no electricity. Step 6. Check them every 2 weeks. Remove any carrot that looks soft, spotted, or has a sprout starting. 1 bad carrot can spread rot to the entire crate, and as Elias put it, rot doesn't send a warning letter. I stored 30 pounds of carrots and 20 pounds of beets last October using this exact method. By late March, I'd lost 3 carrots and 1 beet. That's less than 2% spoilage. The rest were sweeter and crisper than anything I've ever pulled from a refrigerated drawer. The beets were so firm, I had to use my good knife to cut them, and when I roasted them, the sugar content had concentrated to the point where my kids asked if I'd added honey. And here is the detail nobody talks about: the cost. A bag of play sand is $5. A wooden crate is free if you ask a grocery store for their apple boxes. The electricity cost is 0 if you have a cold corner. That means 6 months of organic carrots and beets grown from a $2 seed packet cost less than a single bag of limp, peeled baby carrots from the grocery store. You are not just saving money, you are reclaiming a connection to your food that the industrial system deliberately severed. The same system that told your grandparents a refrigerator was progress and a root cellar was old-fashioned, was selling you a product that does the job worse. Elias died 2 years ago at 81, but his crates are still under that barn, still full every October, still feeding his grandchildren. The sand doesn't care if you believe in it. It just works. There's a quiet truth buried under all of this. The refrigerator didn't win because it was better. It won because it was convenient, and because an entire generation was taught that old ways were backward ways. But a sand-filled crate in a cold corner doesn't break. It doesn't need a warranty. It doesn't spike your electric bill. It just keeps your food alive until you are ready to eat it, the way it did for Elias, for his great-grandfather, and for thousands of families who understood that real security isn't plugged into a wall. The question isn't whether sand storage works. The question is what else we've forgotten that works just as well, sitting right under our feet. If this kind of knowledge makes sense to you, hit subscribe and like this video so it finds the people who need it. And if you are ready to go deeper, I've put together something special for viewers like you, a full guide to the root cellar methods I documented in Lancaster County. You'll find the link in the first pinned comment. The old-timers didn't need electricity. They needed patience, and the sand remembers.